Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the first Wheels of Welcome call. This is really, really exciting. As everybody's starting to join us, feel free to be on video if you want to. You don't have to. I would ask you to mute just in case, dogs or kids or whoever. But we will have plenty of time for question and answer at the end. Um, as we're going through this, please do feel free to put your questions into the chat box. And I will do my best to address them as we go, or I'll let you know, hey, we've got that coming up soon. So our first call is tonight. I'll talk about what we'll be covering. Our next call is in May. And May will be a lot of fun because it'll be less than a month out from the event. But hopefully, tonight you're feeling excited. You might be thinking, what did I get myself into? But hopefully not too many nerves yet because you still have tons of time to prepare. And even if you haven't ridden your bike yet this season, for the 25 and 50-mile distance, you still have plenty of time to prepare. So my goal with this program, and when I pitched it to Christie, so I rode the 50-mile in 2021. And I remember, lining up and just not knowing what in the world I had gotten myself into. Did I bring the right things? Did I have enough food? Was I going to be able to navigate? Just all those little unknown things. And I knew I wasn't the only one as I was talking to other people. And as I've become more of a leader or a presence in the cycling world, I know that there is a pretty big barrier to doing your first gravel event. So my goal for this program is to lower those barriers and make sure that every single one of you feels fully prepared going into this. It is going to take work on your side. I'm not going to have all the answers, but hopefully be able to guide you to some resources, together through the Facebook group, through these calls. Hopefully, we'll be able to find the answers if we don't know all the answers. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say about that. We'll get into this. So our call for tonight, we're going to do a little bit of an introduction to the program. I'm going to tell you who you're doing this with, where you're all from, so you don't feel so alone. Tell you a little bit more about the goals for the program. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about, gravel races and events. There's a lot of you who have never done a gravel event, which is really exciting, but just to give you kind of a framework for what we're working with. We'll talk a little bit about gear and equipment essentials, and lots of questions had come through about tires. We'll spend a little bit of time on tires, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on training and preparation. I am not a cycling coach, but I have completed many long distance endurance events. And so my hope is to inspire you and then lead you to resources if you do want to connect with a coach or a training plan, etc. So a little bit about me. I think lots of folks know who I am, but I'm an influencer, I'm an athlete, I'm an advocate. I do want to be really upfront. I am sponsored by a number of brands, and so you might hear me talking about some of these brands, but I just want to disclose that. Like, I do have a relationship with Shimano and Cannondale and Ride with GPS. And so my hope is to, send you discounts when I can. We've got a free 30-day trial of Ride with GPS that we'll get to. But I just want to be really transparent about this. These are the brands that I work with. And so I do have a vested interest in that. So just for transparency's sake. I've also, if you might have heard about it, started All Bodies on Bikes. It's a nonprofit group. We have 13 chapters, including, for the folks in Kansas City. We've got a chapter in Kansas City, but our whole goal is to make cycling more inclusive for people of all sizes and abilities. We will have a presence at Unbound this year, which is really exciting. And we have lots of great resources on our website. So if you're not familiar with All Bodies on Bikes, it can be another great resource to look into. I'm going to turn it over to Christie real quick. Christie is basically who said yes to this program. Christie works for Lifetime, and I'll let her tell you about herself. But she is a huge advocate for inclusion in cycling, and I'm really excited to have her support with this. So Christie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much. I'm obviously very excited to be here. I'm very much in awe of all of you that are taking on the challenge of joining us here in Emporia, Kansas on June 1st. It's an exciting adventure, and I think you're in great hands with Marley, and I really hope to help as well, guide you to what it's going to be like for you here at Unbound in Emporia on June 1. I'm a Emporia, Kansas local. I am from here. I like to say that my kids were the 4th generation to graduate from Emporia High School. So I know Emporia like the back of my hand. I've been with the event basically since the beginning of it in 2006. My husband was one of the initial 34 riders. I was inspired by not only those athletes, but just getting out into the beauty of the Flint Hills that are just really special. It's a really special place to ride your bike, and came on board full time with the event side of the event after the 2008 event. So been with it for a long time and have been credited with the growth of it to moving it downtown. That was kind of one of my brainchilds of moving it downtown and helping grow the event and really working towards economic impact for my hometown of Emporia, Kansas. Outside of that, like really have been involved in trying to get more people on bikes. And I love what Marley's doing. I think it's really important. I know you guys get to see and hear a lot about the pros, but if you look deep in it, if you really look at Unbound's channels and even any of the Lifetime channels, you're going to see that we spend a lot of time trying to convey the stories of everyday athletes, because I think those are the ones, those athletes like ourselves that are on this call are the ones that have the true stories and are really doing remarkable storytelling and building community on the bike. And that's something I'm very passionate about. So I'm super excited you guys are here. As overwhelming as it can be, I want you to know it's totally approachable, and we're here to answer questions, and I'm here to help. So is that good enough, Marley?
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And you'll see on there, the Girls Gone Gravel podcast is a
Yes.
long running podcast that has interviewed so many folks in the gravel world. And so if you're a podcast listener, I recommend, listening to some of those episodes. Tons of great advice in there from people, from the pros all the way to, myself, other folks who have been involved in this space for a long time. So it's a really great podcast. So the program goals, I briefly touched on this, but, really want to cultivate an inclusive community. When we get on the ground in Emporia, I'm hoping to get shirts made. If anybody's a graphic designer, holler at me, because I am not. But essentially, I want y'all to connect with each other. I want you to see each other's faces and be like, oh yeah, I know that person. Or, hey, we chatted on that Facebook group, whatever it might be. And to have those vibes spread outwards. I know I already mentioned, I want to lower the barrier to entry to these gravel events. Even if your goal is never to do the 100-mile, I want you to feel like you have a place at Unbound, Mid-South, Dirty Roubaix, whatever it might be, to feel that whatever pace you are at and whatever distance you're going, you have a place at these events. And then finally, I want to educate and prepare you for success. And that's whatever success means for you. Ideally, that's getting across the finish line for everybody. But for some of you, that might be, getting one of those age group categories. The 50-mile is now a race this year. And so for some of you, that might be your goal. Hopefully you're doing some additional training besides what we'll talk about. But for, I think, a lot of us, success is going to be finishing and feeling good. I hope to get you all to a point where you do the 50 miles and then you're able to hang out afterwards and continue to watch people cross the finish line. I don't want this to be the hardest thing you've ever done. And it might be, but I'm hoping that with the right preparation, you're going to feel really good about this and really proud of yourself and want to come back again next year. So I was going to do breakout rooms and then it just became too overwhelming. And so this is an experiment. I'm hoping in the chat box, folks will introduce themselves and, your name, your pronouns, if you want to share them, your location, and then maybe one thing you're hoping to get from this program. I realize there's going to be a flurry of things and it's going to be hard to keep up with, but feel free to introduce yourself as the call goes on. And, or maybe if somebody says something that resonates, feel free to jump in there. And then maybe next time we will do the breakout rooms and chat a little bit more. Okay, so I've done this for a long time as far as, community building, and I found that it's really helpful to set some ground rules and some expectations for the community. Let's open this up to additional expectations, but this is what I have. So the first one, and I'm sorry about this slide. There's a lot of text on there, and it's never a good idea to have this much text, but it's happening. So the first one is, it all starts with respect. We're all coming from different places, different experience levels, different goals. Our rides are going to look different. Our bikes are going to look different. Some of us might be on e-bikes. Some of us might be on hybrid bikes. Some of us might be on $10,000 beautiful fancy carbon bikes, and that is okay. Let's all respect each other and recognize that we're all coming from different places. Second one, there's no dumb questions, but a little research will go a long way. One of the things that I've learned to appreciate about gravel is the self-sufficiency that has taught me. And so I'm hoping that, we'll start to use the Facebook group to ask questions, or, hey, I'm thinking about this tire. Does anybody have experience with it? Or, I learned how to download a route on Ride with GPS, whatever it might be. So please do ask questions, but please also do some additional research. Does that make sense? I don't want to off-put anybody from asking anything, but sometimes when you say like, we're here to, there's no dumb questions, you get some things that's like, you could probably Google that. And then the third thing is just, the motto from All Bodies on Bikes. All bodies are good bodies. All bikes are good bikes, and all rides should be celebrated. Please don't body shame anybody, including yourself. All bikes, as long as they're safe, are good bikes. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I think most of y'all already have a gravel bike, and that won't be a big deal. But we love e-bikes. We love adaptive bikes. We're going to try not to shame other people's bikes. So the program components, I think y'all already know this, so I'll do it quickly. So we have the online community. So please join that Facebook group if you haven't yet. It's called Wheels of Welcome. You should be able to find it. If you didn't see the link in my email, I can also resend it. That's a great place to, share your victories, share your rides, hey, I went on my longest ride, like really use that as a community. We'll have these informational calls. 2 are planned right now. If we need to add a third, or maybe just like a third where it's like an open conversation, we can totally do that. And then probably the thing that I'm most excited about is like on the ground meetups in Emporia. So Unbound, I call it the Super Bowl of gravel because it is a huge production. If you've been there before, they shut down, is that Commercial Street? They shut down Commercial Street. There's a big expo, there's rides happening, and we will have 2 dedicated events for us. Oh, David, I love that idea about a Strava group. I'm going to write that down and we will make that happen. I love that. So the ShakeOut ride, the details are TBD. And we'll talk about what a ShakeOut ride is if you're like, what are you even talking about, Marley? But we will have a ride and it'll end at a happy hour at Shimano Park. So there's a little grassy area that has come to be known as Shimano Park. They do a big tent and picnic tables, and Best Day Brewing has come on. They make not really good non-athletic or non-alcoholic beers. They'll be supporting us with that. So that'll be a lot of fun. But I'm excited to meet up with y'all and hopefully, make some friends. And then when we actually do the ride, or the race on Saturday, you'll have people to ride with. So I thought it'd be fun to just look at a map of where everybody is coming from that has signed up for this program. As kind of expected, a large group of folks right around Emporia in the Midwest. But we got people from Florida, from Maine, from Canada, from California, all over the place. So really great geographic spread, which is kind of fun. Thought it'd be interesting to give you the gender breakdown. So most 49% of folks that have signed up are female. 43% of people are male identified, and then almost 7% of folks identified as non-binary, which is pretty cool. And it makes me stoked that folks feel comfortable to join this, and I'm really excited to support all of y'all. And I would just ask that people respect each other's pronouns when we get to the ground and here in Emporia. And yeah, Michael, nobody will be shamed in Shimano Park. I just have that relationship with Shimano, and so they were like, yeah, we would love to host you guys, but we won't shame you at all. And then, what distances? So most folks who have signed up for this are doing the 50-mile, 70%, and then about 28, almost 29% of folks are doing the 25-mile. So really excited to just support everybody through this. So let's talk about the gravel experience. I should have put that stat on there, but it's about 60% of folks have never done a gravel event before. So I'm really excited for you all to experience this, and I hope that you fall in love with gravel events as much as I have. So things to know. It is an all weekend affair. It actually starts on Wednesday and will go through Sunday. So depending on, how much time you have off from work, your travel availability, housing, all of that is obviously going to impact your ability to be in Emporia. But just be aware that there are events happening all day starting on Wednesday, and we'll talk more about that. The second big thing about gravel events is it's a ride your own ride kind of thing. I took this from the hiking community of a hike your own hike. It's easy to go too fast. It's easy to, get caught up in a group that's not riding in a style that makes your heart happy. And so I'm just going to encourage you all to ride your own ride, whatever that means for you. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the rules of Unbound. So, weekend schedule. So like I said, things start on Wednesday. The official schedule has not been released yet. Christy, do you know when that comes out?
We should be seeing it here about 3 to 4 weeks before the event. So it does take a little bit just because there's a lot of scheduling that we have coming on. Wednesday, the big kickoff with it is this Gravel Cycling Hall of Fame induction. And so really Thursday is when it gets really going, but Wednesday,
Thursday is the
day
big
to
day.
get in here too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and this could change. I don't expect it to. I kind of jumped the gun on this, but typically the expo is Thursday and Friday.
Mhm.
Packet pickup is also typically Thursday and Friday, so you can typically plan on that. Race day is Saturday. And your job is to manage your energy so that you feel great on Saturday. It's really easy. Take it like from my own experience to get caught up in the expo and to, go to the autograph signings and go to the panels and go to the shakeout rides, and it makes for a very long day. So I just encourage you to, be aware of your energy. Take a look at the schedule when it comes out. It'll be on unboundgravel.com. And, pick and choose the things that feel right for you. It's typically pretty hot. Last year we had some fun thunderstorms. But take breaks as you need it. It's really easy to get FOMO, at least for me, the fear of missing out if I don't spend all day at the expo. But then you get to Saturday and you're exhausted. And it's like, I haven't even ridden my bike yet. And so maybe you won't have this problem, but I would just encourage you to, meter out your energy through Saturday. Shakeout rides. You might have heard me talk about this a couple times. What the heck are shakeout rides? They're an opportunity to meet other people, to meet other riders. And I'd encourage you, look at the schedule. Chamois Butter typically does a shakeout ride that's quite inclusive. There's typically a couple inclusive rides if you want to challenge yourself a little bit. It's also a great chance to dial in your bike setup. If you traveled and you took your bike apart, this is a great chance to make sure all your bolts are tight. True story, a couple years ago, I was leading an Unbound shakeout ride and my back wheel almost came off. Somebody said, "Hey, Marley, your wheel looks a little funky." So we stopped, and sure enough, I hadn't tightened it all the way. And so this shakeouts are really a chance to make sure, you've got everything set up just right and you're feeling good. Our shakeout ride will be a short distance. Sometimes, and this is my own personal frustration, sometimes the shakeout rides are, 20, 22 miles long. And if you're only go, I don't want to say only going, but you're planning to ride 25 miles, a 22-mile shakeout ride might not be appropriate. So our ride, we haven't figured out the route quite yet, but it'll be a good distance. It'll be a nice social pace. So that way you don't tire yourself out before the actual ride and the actual event on Saturday. This is all coming from my own pet peeves that I've experienced. And like I said, pick one that's appropriate for you. And they can be a really fun opportunity. One of the things that folks talked about in the initial survey was learning how to ride in a group. And this can also be a good opportunity to just get those nerves out and figure out how that all kind of works. And I've got a couple slides on that later. So you all might have heard the mullet analogy used for gravel events. And typically, a mullet is like business in the front, party in the back. And that's often how things shake out at these gravel events. Especially in the longer distances where you have pros competing, it's business at the front. They have a job to do and they are taking care of it. But we will also see that in the 25 and the 50 mile. You get those folks who are very serious and have a goal and are competing, either against themselves or against other people. They'll be at the front of the pack. If you are taking things more leisurely, kind of doing your own thing, I'd encourage you to stay, at least start towards the back of the pack. So that way you have a little bit more freedom to move. And it's just a little bit less hectic. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, cool. I talked about this a little bit already, but just a really good reminder to ride your own ride. It's really easy as we get going to get caught up in, I'm chatting with these folks and it's feeling really good and I'm going really fast. And then you realize, oh, we've only gone 5 miles. I still have 45 miles left to go. So just, as you get out there, keeping your pace in check, keeping your expectations, and just remember, this day is for you. It's not for anybody else. And at the end of the day, you have that accomplishment of finishing. Michelle, great question Michelle asked, do we have the time requirement like I did for the 100? Do we have to be at the rest stop by X amount of time? There is not a time requirement for us. They do encourage strongly that we try and maintain a 10-mile-an-hour pace, because they have to, the people who are blocking off roads or, helping with things and volunteers. And I'll let Christie, do you want to say anything about that?
It really, I mean, that's the suggested time frame, but really, we do not have time cutoffs for 50 or 25 milers. So
yeah. So hopefully that takes some stress off of you.
Mhm.
I mean, you don't want to be out there dilly-dallying all day because it is going to be hot, likely. And so you're going to want to push yourself and maintain a good pace. But there isn't a time cutoff, which hopefully helps a lot. Yeah, Brian, great point. 7 hours to do the 50 last year. That's probably what it'll take me. I typically average 10 miles an hour on gravel. But when you include stops and all sorts of things, 7 hours is probably about where I will be as well, if it's a good day. Okay.
And that's okay.
It is okay. It's
Yeah,
7 great
it's so
hours.
fine. Yeah.
That is nothing to be ashamed of. That's incredible, actually. And so, I wanted to put this on here. So the rules of Unbound. So it hasn't come out yet, but it will. There is a very, very, very comprehensive rider guide. I'd encourage you, last year's rider guide is still out there. Go in and take a look at it. It will answer literally every question that you have. The big thing is there is no outside support or help. And, for the 100 and the 200 mile at their aid stations, they are allowed to have a support crew there. For us, I believe all of our aid stations are no outside support. And Christy, please jump in if I say anything incorrect here.
You can have them there, but we encourage you to use the support that we provide just to help reduce the traffic. So
Okay.
I think the other really great thing that I will add is that you all are totally allowed to support each other. So I think that's a really key point, is that we encourage riders to help each other out. So it's not, you're not alone out there. Yeah. You're not. So
yeah, you're not alone by any means. When people get flat tires, there's often, you ride by and like, hey, do you have everything? And hopefully you will have everything. You will be fully prepared. We're going to talk about that. But you'll be able to lend a hand if somebody else is not prepared. But fingers crossed, everybody's going to be fully prepared. You do need to have somebody on call in case something goes horribly wrong and you need to exit or get picked up. I know this can be challenging for folks who are not local, but maybe within this group, if there's somebody flying in by themselves, we can share resources, or if somebody's partner or spouse will be out there, we can share that among each other. But ideally, you're not going to need it. You're going to meet your family back in Emporia and you're going to celebrate and be really proud of your accomplishment. And this isn't an official rule, but don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk to each other. Don't be a jerk to the people in the towns, to the animals, pick up your litter, all of those things. Any questions so far?
somebody asked if the outside pickup is requirement. It's not a requirement. You just need to be able to do it. Like, you can't call a race director and get someone to come pick you up. So
Yeah.
we're not checking that you have somebody there to pick you up, but we're not going to come get you.
So nobody's gonna like require you to write down who your support person is. But if you get into a situation, you do need a way to get off of course, if that makes sense. Um, so this is a really great question. The first thought, if no outside support is scary, what types of support you may need. So typically, the things that are going to go wrong, well, hopefully nothing is going to go wrong, but the typical things that go wrong is like a catastrophic mechanical issue. Maybe you get a hole in your tire, that you can't fix. It's a flat tire that you can't fix. Maybe you break your derailleur, things like that. Heat exhaustion. You just don't fuel properly and you aren't able to finish. Those are the types of support that you would need. There is an aid station on both the 25 and the 50 mile. They typically have great snacks. I remember having the best Coca-Cola of my life at one of those aid stations, followed by a pickle, and it was amazing. So that's the kind of support that is out there. But you do need to be self-sufficient. You're gonna need to know how to navigate, which we'll talk about. You'll need to know some basic repair skills. We're gonna talk about that in just a second. And then you need to have enough hydration and nutrition on yourself to get you to that aid station. And we will also talk about that. David, I am not sure about this. I don't think the local Jeep club, I think you might be thinking of Mid-South. Honestly, like for the purposes of this, I'm going to say like, and Christie, please step in if I'm saying something wrong. Please do not be counting on somebody else to pick you up. You need to have your own way to get off the course.
Yeah, I did chime in there. You plan on having your way to get off the course. So
Okay.
we attempted that last year and it was very problematic. So, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. And Brian, great point. Yeah, take cash. Locals will sometimes have snacks or sodas for sale on the route, or it's like for donation. So throw something in. Kids will have lemonade stands. People are so excited to see us go past, and it's really, really fun. Okay, so we're gonna switch topics over to gear and equipment. A lot of folks had questions about this, and we can definitely dive in more on the Facebook group as well. Okay, interesting. All right, Michael. Yeah, I see that, but again, I would, if you're able to bring somebody, please do. So, Christy, do you have anything to say?
I mean, that, like I said, they may have navigated that piece. So, I think the other thing just to is remember is that you do need to understand that you could be waiting for a while. So,
Yeah, because they're going to prioritize catastrophic issues first. If you're just decide to quit, you might get picked up in 2 hours. In that time, you could have ridden another 20 miles. So my hope is that it's not going to be an issue. You all are going to go in so fully prepared that you are encouraging other people not to quit. So let's think positively here. So gear and equipment. So you're going to need a suitable bike. We will talk about that in just a second. But ideally a gravel bike. You're going to want wide enough tires. The route does go north this year. And Christy, please correct me, and we won't know this until the routes come out. But when we did the 50 a couple years ago, it got into some fairly remote, fairly challenging terrain, nothing that was impassable or impossible. But you do need to be prepared for some rough gravel roads.
yes.
And that's part of the fun of Unbound, honestly. Like that's why we signed up for it. You're going to need a helmet, of course. Helmets are required. Comfortable riding shoes, clothes, and gloves. I really encourage you to focus on like the 3 points of contact. So your hands, make sure that your hands are comfortable, whether that's gloves or no gloves. Making sure your butt is comfortable. So now is a really great time to get a bike fit. Make sure your saddle is comfortable. Like start spending hours on your bike and figuring out where are those pain points? Is your neck getting stiff? Is your foot going numb? These are all things to figure out now. And then again, your shoes, figuring out what feels good, what you can maintain for a long time on the bike. You're also going to need a way to carry your nutrition, hydration, and tools. And so I'm going to show you my setup in a minute of where I carry all of these things. But again, it's that self-sufficiency. You're going to need to carry all of that stuff on you. And then the last thing is a navigation device. We'll talk about that as well. Inside of the rider guide, there is a list. It's the equipment checklist, and it's really nice because it goes through, must have, nice to have, and then I forget what the third category is. But if you follow that checklist, you will have everything you need plus more. Great question, David. The course is not marked. I believe some of the major intersections are marked, but if you're slow like me, sometimes you'll be out there by yourself and there won't be anybody in front of you to follow their turn. Also, you can't always trust the person in front of you because maybe they are reading their map wrong. So we're going to talk about navigation and how to have all of those essentials. But the course is not marked. And that was one of the things I saw when I was out there at Unbound a couple years ago, is folks didn't realize that and didn't know how to navigate the course. So my hope is that you all are going to be fully prepared on that.
Real quick, we often get the question of why is it not marked? We've had trouble with locals going out and changing the course markings. So that puts you off course, and that's worse than having a way to self-navigate. So we don't mark the course. We will mark major intersections if need be, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, and again, I don't think bike selection is a huge concern for most of you. If you have specific questions of will this bike work, feel free to email me and we can, workshop that out together. But it's all about gravel bikes it's a fancy term, and they've gotten really, really specific, but it's all about expanding the type of terrain you can ride on. So, road bikes typically have really skinny tires, gravel bikes have a wider tire. And that's really going to help you immensely. So if you have an existing bike and you're like, I think this might work, shoot me an email, and especially with a picture, and let's talk about it together. Nobody needs to go out and spend thousands of dollars on this, especially for the 25 and 50 mile. Like, most bikes, if they have wide enough tires, are going to work for this. The other thing, gears are your friend, especially on gravel. You're gonna make sure your gears are shifting well and that you know how to use them. A couple of you asked about climbing hills and descending. My best advice is start practicing now. If you live in a place that's flat, good luck. But realistically, go to a parking lot, go to a bike path, and just get really familiar with your gear shifting and, which finger to use to make it harder, which finger to use to make it easier. So that way it just becomes second nature. When you see that hill coming up, you can start getting your gears ready. And worst comes to worst, you walk a hill. It's no big deal. It happens to the best of us, and sometimes it's a nice break from the side. Finally, the other thing is make sure your bike is comfortable. Now is a great time to get a bike fit if you are able to afford that. Oftentimes, insurance plans will cover it, and they will help make sure that you are set up correctly for your own goals. And again, like I said, focus on your contact points, your hands, your feet, and your butt. I put a resource in here. And I'll send this slideshow out to everybody. Bicycling Magazine has a really great gravel resource guide talking about all of this stuff. Stephen has a question about the parameter of wheels width we should use. My recommendation is a minimum of like 38. So wheels are like typically 700 and it'll, by 28, by 38, by 42. If you're riding a mountain bike, it'll be, like a 26-inch wheel or 27.5, and then it'll be like an X, and it'll be like, 2-inch or 2.2. You don't need a fat tire. You don't need a 4-inch tire, but I think right around the 40 mark, 42 is usually pretty good. Yeah, and we can talk about this in the Facebook group as well. I personally ride with 42s, and they have been phenomenal on every type of gravel I've gone on. E-bikes are allowed in the 25 and the 50. Again, Christy, please correct me if I'm saying anything wrong here. Okay, e-bikes are allowed, so great resource there if you have access to one. I wish I had one. It would make my riding so much easier, but I don't. Tandem bikes are also an option. Just make sure you registered for that. And honestly, flat bar, drop bar, they're all allowed. You just need to make sure that you are comfortable. You know, I rode with a flat bar a couple years ago and I loved it. I've since switched to drop bars. You will see people with what are called aero bars. I do not recommend them, especially for folks doing the 25 and the 50-mile distance. You know, we're not out there for that long to justify aero bars. And I think that they can cause some problems as well. So, you know, ride what you currently have, and you'll be fine. So. Okay, so quickly, I'm going to go through my setup to give you guys an idea of what I'm riding and what has proved to work really well for me over the last 3 or 4 years. So I've got a Cannondale Topstone 4. I've got the Shimano GRX. It's got 2 gears in the front and 12 in the back. Most of the time I'm in the little ring on the front and one of the bigger rings on the back, you know, just kind of climbing slowly. I use the Vittoria, they're called Vittoria Terreno dry tires. Even though they're designed for dry conditions, I've used them in wet and they were just fine. And like I said, I'm running a 42 width. One of the questions that came up was navigation devices. So I use the Wahoo Element Bolt. It works really well. It's been super reliable. It's got a really long battery life. I know Garmin makes great devices as well. I'm not sponsored by either of them. Garmin makes a solar powered one if you're worried about battery life. And I will say, for years and years and years, I use just my phone, which is fine. However, having that separate bike computer was 100% worth the investment. And so if you're trying to decide where to spend money, a bike computer can be an incredible investment for navigation, for expanding your confidence on rides, for all sorts of things. And so, you know, if you're thinking about it, I do recommend a bike computer. It's kind of hard to see in this setup, but I have a handlebar bag. And in there, that's where I keep my repair kit and some extra nutrition. And hopefully I don't need to touch that bag the entire day, but it is there just in case. And it, you know, tons of brands make them. Find one that you like the look of, and, you know, that fits sturdily on your bicycle, and isn't going to be in the way. I also use this feed bag. It's this little black thing right here, as like quick access for snacks. So I will have literally like a Ziploc baggie of snacks in there that I can just reach my hands in and eat as I'm riding. You know, I will also have gels and bars and all of that stuff. And I use that to like stuff. You can see all my trash on the side. But this handlebar bag has been so useful in just quick access to chapstick or sunscreen or whatever it might be. I also, you know, talking about hydration, I use a hydration vest that has 1.5 liters on the back. And then I use 2 bottles as well. And I typically will refill those at the aid station. I have never, knock on wood, run out of water on a ride using this setup. I think that means I'm carrying almost 4 liters, which is a decent amount of weight. But I'm not worried about weight while I'm out there. I'd rather have the hydration and feel good. You know, one of the reasons why I love the hydration pack is, you know, it's a lot easier to reach down quickly and grab that straw and put it in my mouth than to reach down and fumble with a bottle while I'm on, you know, maybe rough terrain or unfamiliar terrain. Great question, David. I don't know what mile the aid station is at because the course hasn't been released yet. But typically it's halfway through. So you'll want enough hydration and nutrition to get you there. I mean, you never know, especially if you've got food allergies or whatnot, bring what you need to be self-sufficient. You know, Unbound is really good about keeping those aid stations open long enough for all of us. But just in case you get there and they're out of Coke or they're out of whatever, you know, make sure you've got enough to get you through the entire ride, which is also why having, you know, multiple places on your bike and on your body to store things is really great. And then just the last thing on here is I have a phone mount, because I really like to have my phone out to take pictures. But that's kind of irrelevant. But I know some people will be using their phone for navigation. And so having a mount that you can quickly see your phone and access it can be really helpful. Vivek, that's a great question. Clipless or flats? It's totally a question of comfort and your own choice. I rode clipless for many, many years, and then I had some knee issues, and I've been riding flats for the past 2 years. So whatever works for you. I would say, if you want to try clipless, now is the time to try it and dial your fit in, dial all of that stuff in. So that way, when we get to June, you feel super confident. The last thing you want is to be in a group, feeling nervous, feeling anxious, and fumbling with your pedals. So, I would say do what feels good for you. The flat pedals nowadays are really great. They've got tons of grip. You can get a high quality pedal that will give you almost as much grip as being locked in. So, oh, Lori, I love that. Clip in one side, flat on the other. I do that as well. So if I want to look cute in a dress and wear normal shoes, I totally can do that as well. So it's really just personal preference. And some people like to ride in sneakers. If we've got specific questions on that, we can definitely dig in later. Yeah, I think Bennett answered Ryan's questions well. Why do people like Coca-Cola during and after rides? Because it's delicious. I'm not a soda drinker normally. Yep. We've got somebody up there. I don't know what your first name is. I apologize. Drinking a Coke. It's just quick hit of calories and it's delicious and I can't explain it. I don't know. It's really good. So, all right, let's keep going. So let's talk about your repair kit. So this is what you need to have in your repair kit. You can definitely have more. And if you look on the internet, people have all sorts of stuff, but at a minimum, you need to have a bike specific multi-tool. Swiss Army knives are cool, but they're not going to have the specific sizes you need on your bike. So get a bike specific multi-tool. You're going to need flat repair supplies, and this is going to take up the bulk of your repair kit. So even if you're running tubeless, I encourage you to bring a spare tube or two. Things go wrong out there. 50 miles, 25 miles can be a surprisingly long way. So have extra tubes on you and make sure those tubes are the right size. I was on a ride recently where I didn't check my repair kit. I had switched my kit from my gravel bike to my mountain bike, and I didn't have the right size tube. It worked out. It was fine. I walked my bike home, which is honestly, you never want to walk your bike home, but just check your stuff on a regular basis. Patches, if you're a person who patches your tubes, tire levers, of course, to get your tire off the rim. And if you're sitting there saying, Marley, I have no idea what a tire lever is, I have homework for you. You're going to learn how to change a tire. I would love for all of you to practice changing your tires before you get to Unbound. You will just be so much more confident. And then when your flat actually happens, it's not a big deal. You're going to want a pump or a CO2 inflator. I encourage you to have both. CO2 is really fast, but sometimes that goes wrong and you need to do a pump. And then multiple CO2 cartridges. If you're flying into town, you cannot fly with CO2, but there's a great bike shop downtown Emporia, and at the expo, there will be plenty of stuff available to purchase. Same thing if you get there and you're like, oh my God, I forgot my repair kit. You can, make do with stuff you can purchase in Emporia. I always encourage you to have zip ties and spare bolts. Hopefully you're not going to need them, but you never know. Zip ties can fix all sorts of things. A small bottle of lube, again, probably not super crucial for the distances we're doing, but sometimes it can be really dry and dusty out there. And so adding a couple drops of lube to your chain while you're at the aid station can be super helpful. And then I always keep extra snacks in my repair kit. Because inevitably you get the flat tire and you realize you're hungry and then it makes changing the tire so much harder. So my rule is always okay, I get a flat tire, I'm going to eat a snack real quick and then I'm going to change my tire. Because you'll probably be stopped for, 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe not that long, but it's a great chance to refuel. Also, if you stop with a buddy who's changing their tire, that is a great chance for you to eat a snack and to refuel and to rehydrate, reapply sunscreen, kind of all of those things that need to happen, but you might not necessarily want to stop to do that. So, Okay, let's talk tires real quickly. Highly recommend a tubeless tire setup with fresh sealant. So without getting too into the weeds, basically tires can have inner tubes or they can be set up tubeless. And essentially they put this like sealant stuff in there that ideally, if you get a small puncture, will go in and help reseal the tire. If your bike is tubeless compatible, or if you don't know, go to your bike shop and ask them. They will help you get it set up, but you do need to put fresh sealant in it every couple months, depending on the weather where you live. And so make sure when you get to Emporia, you've got fresh sealant in there. I already mentioned this, I'm going to mention again, know how to change a flat and practice. YouTube has a million great resources for this. And honestly, like when I first started riding, I would bring my bike inside, I would watch a YouTube video, and I would change my tire watching the YouTube video. Know how to take your wheel off your bike. That's step one. A lot of folks have never taken their wheels off their bike. So make sure you know how to do that. Make sure you know how to put it back on safely. All of those things. It can seem really daunting, but I promise you, it's not that bad. Look and see if any bike shops around you have classes. Oftentimes people will, put on clinics or fix a flat classes. Go to those. They're very helpful. The Flint Hills are notorious for sidewall gashes. I don't think we'll be getting far enough up to get into that really sharp gravel. But if you're looking for new tires, I recommend you look for one that has a reinforced sidewall. This might all sound like gobbledygook right now, but I'm gonna send you this and then you'll be like, Marley said something about a sidewall. And so just talk to your bike shop as well. Tell them you're doing Unbound, you're looking for a strong tire that's gonna get you through, and they'll hopefully get you set up. I'm gonna jinx myself when I say this, but I've been going to Unbound for the last 3 years, thousands of gravel miles. I have not gotten a flat tire since I've been doing this, and I'm gonna knock on wood. But honestly, it's because I check my tire pressure every time, and I've gotten really lucky. Like I'm due for a flat tire, but if you keep your PSI, your tire pressure at an appropriate amount, and hopefully you're not going to get a flat tire. But I want you to be prepared if it does happen. Okay, I'm going to skip this slide because we already talked about all of that. Okay, let's talk about navigation. So we talked about it briefly a little bit already, but the course is unmarked, so you will need to navigate for yourself. My biggest recommendation here is start, downloading routes around your area, and getting comfortable with the software now. Make sure when the courses come out, I'm sure Unbound is going to send us an email and say, the 2024 courses are released. Make sure you download that before you get to Emporia. Typically you need to be connected to Wi-Fi to get it, from the computer or from the software to your navigation device. And that's a lot easier to do at home where, all your devices are already connected to the Wi-Fi and all of that stuff. And then, like I said, practice navigating before, start doing this on your own. Ride with GPS can be a very overwhelming software to use. And if it would be helpful, we could do a separate session with just them and this group. So let me know if folks would be interested in doing that and we can make it happen. Sorry, I'm just catching up on the chat real quick. Oh yeah, that's a great suggestion to take a picture of your rear tire setup so you know how to reinstall. Okay, this might feel like overkill right now. It will be useful, I promise you, but you're gonna want to know how to download a route. So basically you're gonna find the route on ridewithgps.com. And I'm gonna, we'll walk through this next time. But if you're like totally confused, just Google it. You're gonna tap the save button or tap the pin button. And then it basically walks you through it. You can send it to your phone, you can send it to your GPS unit. It's pretty darn simple. You'll want to sync your device and then you just find the route and you go. One really important thing to know. So Ride with GPS is free to use. However, you can't get access to the routes offline unless you have premium. So I feel like last time I was in Emporia, the cell service was pretty good all over. but I wouldn't count on having self-service. You're gonna want to download the route. You can go old school, and you can print out a cue sheet from Ride with GPS and have like a physical paper that'll tell you, where to turn and all that stuff. And that's a really great backup plan. But otherwise, I would spring for premium. It's not that much, to have the route downloaded offline. And I will send this to all of you. They've given all of us a free 30-day premium trial so you can access all of the features. So here's the instructions for that if you want to take a screenshot of it or take a picture of it, but I will also be sending an email with it. And I probably will go ahead and set up an informational call with Ride with GPS, because especially when you first start using it, it can be very daunting and very overwhelming. But I want y'all to feel confident that you've got the route and all of that stuff. So, okay, we're going to switch topics now to training and preparation. This is a picture from that shakeout ride I was telling you about when my wheel fell off. It was really cool. But the group stopped, we took a picture together, and it was no big deal. Okay, so preparation. So the big thing that I want to get across here is there are a lot of things that are under your control, and there's a few things that are out of your control. But if you take care of everything that's under your control, you'll be able to handle the things that are out of your control. So, right now you can work on all of these things, your bike fit and your setup. You can figure out the tire pressure that you like. Hopefully you all know this, but on the side of your tire, it has a little, it's not an indentation, but it's like a raised thing or a printed thing that'll tell you your tire pressure. It usually is a range, and I would say play with that. The tire pressure you like on the road might be different than the tire pressure you like on gravel. So spend these next couple months dialing that in and figuring that out. Mechanical prep, we just talked about that. So spend this time figuring all that stuff out. You can also figure out your nutrition and your hydration plan. We're going to spend a lot more time on this on the next call. But eating is 90% of the battle during an endurance ride. So you're going to want to know what foods make your body happy, what foods you like to eat, and how often and frequent you want to be eating. You're also in control of your navigation plan. You're in control of your fitness and your endurance. We're 3 months out right now. I'd really encourage you to start riding regularly if you haven't yet. And we'll talk more specifics in a couple slides. But probably the biggest thing you control is your attitude. It can be really scary and really daunting, but going into this with a positive attitude of like, yes, I am confident. I am a grown person. I can do this, and I am fully prepared is going to get you a long way. Some of the things that are out of your control, the weather. Last year, I'm sure you guys have seen the pictures of the giant mud pit that happened. That's totally out of your control. But if you take care of all those other things we talked about, yes, the mud is still going to suck. However, it's not going to be the end of the world, hopefully. Same thing with course conditions. Sometimes they're fast, sometimes there's washed out sections, sometimes we have zero control over any of that. And that's part of the reason we sign up for gravel. Like that's part of the excitement. And so if you can learn to embrace that and go into it with that attitude, it's going to change your entire experience. We also have no control over the wind direction. Ideally the wind gods will be with us and we'll have tailwinds in every direction, but we know that's not how it works. And then the other thing is you can't control how fast other people are going. And the reason I say that is maybe you're like, I want to get first in my age group. You might have control over that. You might not. There could be other people who are extremely well trained, who are super, super fast, but you can just do the best that you can do. And Brian, that is an incredible suggestion. Practice walking with your bike just in case. Make sure your shoes are comfortable to walk a little bit in if you think that's going to be part of your experience. If you're like, no, I've never walked a bike a day in my life, it might not be that big of a deal, but for most of us, walking our bike is sometimes a necessary evil. So yeah, practice with it. Make sure you feel good about it. David asked about suggestions on tire inserts. I've never used tire inserts myself. I don't know if anybody in this group has and can suggest anything. But again, I would say ask your bike shop. I'm trying to think. I know I see them being installed all the time, and I think people like them. I've just never used them myself. I feel like past couple years at the expo, there will be a couple of tire insert companies. And so you can always get that set up there. However, just a word of caution, it can be really exciting at that expo. There's bags and nutrition and all these new things to try, but don't change your routine up too much. If you've been practicing and training with one type of hydration product and electrolytes, you should stick with that on race day, because you know it and you know that it works. And the worst would be, to get something that you're really excited about and then you end up, your body doesn't like it or you're allergic to it or God forbid, who knows what else. All right. So training, again, I am not a coach by any means whatsoever. So take all of this with a grain of salt. However, I have successfully finished many, many, many endurance events. So the biggest advice I can give you right now is time in the saddle is what's going to count. Start riding now. Focus on increasing your time in the saddle, your distance, maybe adding some interval training in there, going a little harder, going slower. But really it's the time in the saddle that's going to matter. Working your distance up. You know, Coaches will say different things. If you can get in a full distance ride, whether that's 25 miles or 50 miles before the event, that can be a great boost to your confidence to know that, hey, I've done this before. I'm just doing the same thing again. If you have time to do that. That being said, I'm riding Mid-South Gravel next week. It's 100 miles. I haven't ridden anywhere close to 100 miles this season. And that's just the way it goes sometimes, that's life. We all have other things going on. The second thing is, training plans or coaches can help. If you guys use Zwift or Ruvi or Training Road or any of those, they often will have, workouts or training plans of like, I'm training for a gravel grinder and it'll have like specific workouts. And I found those to be really helpful, just to have some structured training. I would also invite you all, if folks are on Zwift, All Bodies on Bikes does a Monday night ride now. So we do a Monday night ride every Monday at 7. It's the banded together option. And so you can ride at your own pace. But we ride for an hour. We have a Discord and we just chat. And some people are going really hard and some people are just taking a leisurely spin. So that's a great option if you are using Zwift and indoor training. And I can send that, or I can put that in the Facebook group information as well. And the third thing is training, also includes nutrition and hydration. Going out for a ride, making sure that you practice eating while you're riding. You practice accessing your water bottles. Dee Dee says, oh yeah, that there's a training plan on the Unbound website. Perfect. I should probably look at that myself. But using this training time to dial in your nutrition as well is absolutely huge. Michael, I can definitely do that. So question from David about what the hills are like on the north route. I'm gonna have to defer to Christie on this because I don't remember. I did it, but I don't remember.
If you're doing the 50, you're going to face some probably, I think the important thing to note about Emporia is it's basically kind of in a riverbed. It sits between two rivers. So it takes about 11 to 15 miles in either direction to actually get to hills. So when you do the math on that, there's not a lot of hills on the 25. The 50 will have some. You're going to be going out and around Coahulla Lake, which there's some decent sized hills out there, but you're going to have 11 miles of flat to get towards there and 11 miles of flat to get back. So that gives you about, 20, 25 miles of some climbing. But nothing is too extreme. So yeah, that's the best way to answer that, I think.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Christie. Yeah. So I mentioned this earlier, but endurance riding is an eating competition just as much as a riding competition. Making sure that you are fueling yourself appropriately to keep going. Like, I believe that all of you are capable of riding 50 miles. Even if you sign up for the 25, you're capable of it. It's just a question of, are you fueling yourself appropriately to make that happen? So this is my hydration and nutrition plan. You know, every person is different, but I think it can be helpful to hear what other people do. So I already mentioned this, but I keep water on my back. I have 1.5 liters on my back. In my bottles is where I have, I use the Scratch high carb mix. It's a high carbohydrate mix. I believe in one bottle, it's like 400 calories. And then I have a bottle of just electrolytes. So not a ton of calories there. I have my Wahoo set up, and we can talk about this separately, to remind me to eat every 100 calories. And the way that I do that is I have a heart rate monitor, and I don't know how accurate it is, but it feels accurate. You know, every 100 calories, a little reminder pops up to say eat. And it's really easy to ignore that, but I'm trying to be better about it and just, you know, either grabbing a handful of trail mix or energy chews or eating a gel or something. You know, it's really easy to get into a calorie deficit during these rides, and your goal is to limit that calorie deficit as much as possible. I also have a lot of snacks within easy reach. So I will have them, I don't know if you guys noticed, but on my hydration vest, I have pockets. So I'll have snacks on my pockets, on my chest. And then I will have snacks if I'm wearing bibs that have cargo pockets, I'll have snacks in there. And then I'll have snacks in my feed bag as well. So that way, you know, no matter where my brain is at, I can always grab something really readily. And I, you know, like I said, I have Scratch on me. I do like the Goo energy gels because it's a really quick, easy 100 calories and they have caffeine in them. And I'm a coffee fiend, and I always find that like the coffee is never sufficient at these events. And so that can be a really nice way to prevent the caffeine headache. Um, I usually have an emergency PB&J sandwich somewhere on me, especially for as you get into longer distances. You know, there could realistically be days where I'm out there at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner. So just having something a little more substantial to put into my belly is really helpful. I also make these little savory rice cakes. Scratch has this incredible book, and I can share this on the Facebook group, about like snacks on the go. You know, I really like a mix of real food, and I call it engineered food, and that's your gels and your energy chews and all of that. Um, I don't have a discount code, but if folks are familiar with the feed, you know, if you look at the pros, everybody's sponsored by the feed nowadays. It's a really cool website where you can try a million different um, like hydration and nutrition products. Because often you have to buy them in bulk and that can get really expensive, but they have like sample packs. So I'm in a conversation with them to hopefully get you guys a discount code. But I'd recommend checking out the feed and just trying different nutrition things and figuring out what works for you. You know, at the aid station, there will often be chips and pretzels and bananas. It's kind of a crapshoot. And so like I said, you know, if you've got food allergies, I myself, I'm allergic to almonds and bananas. And so oftentimes I'll get to an aid station and I can't eat any of the food that they have. And so making sure that you've got enough to take care of that. Also, Bennett, that isn't perfect suggestion. Don't just pack sweets, you know, beef jerky sticks, something salty, a protein bar. Because yeah, you're going to get sick of eating and you're going to get sick of eating the same thing. So having a variety of snacks and flavors can be really, really helpful. Some of my essentials, I train with a heart rate monitor and I wear a heart rate monitor. It can, and once you get to know how your body is, especially with the excitement of race day, it can be really easy to go out way too fast. And so for me, using that heart rate monitor to say, okay, yeah, this is a pace that I can maintain for the rest of the day. And I don't really worry about the miles per hour. I don't worry about anything else. It's more, is my heart rate at a place where I can maintain this for the rest of the day? You know, if I start getting up into the red zone, you know, 170, 180, 190, I know that I've got to dial it back because that's not sustainable for me. So if you don't currently use a heart rate monitor, it can be a valuable tool to use to your training arsenal. I will say Wahoo's strap is pretty darn size inclusive. It fits, I forget what inch up to, but it does expand pretty darn far if that is a concern of yours. I already mentioned this, but again, practice eating and drinking on your bike. You know, maybe you need to get a side load water bottle cage. because you can't access yours really easily. Now is the time to practice eating and drinking and pulling all those things, and knowing where they're going to be at on your bike. And then my recommendation, again, not a coach, but aim for 2 to 3 rides per week, increasing in distance and time, and that'll get easier as the days get longer and the weather gets nicer. But again, don't stress about this. This should be fun. So trying to keep your riding fun and exciting, and I wouldn't stress about it too much, Again, 25 and 50 miles is not this crazy huge distance. It is going to feel hard. It is going to be an accomplishment, but it is very doable, especially if you start riding now. Okay, so real quickly, we had a bunch of questions in the survey about group riding techniques, or like how to ride during a race. And so I kind of put together some of my best techniques, but I think this could also be like a crowdsource thing. The biggest thing is when you line up at the start, the people that are really excited and really planning to go out fast are going to be at the front of the corral. If you're taking things a little more relaxed, or, that you're not super competitive, line up towards the back or in the middle, find other folks who hopefully maybe from this group that you want to ride together with. But don't stress about the start so much, especially if you're not competitive. You want to ride predictably, especially at the beginning. There are going to be lots of folks on all sides of you. And so making sure you're not swerving unexpectedly, you're not stopping unexpectedly. If you are stopping, maneuvering to the right side of the road, just like you would if you were riding your bike normally. A lot of these things are things that you would do on a normal ride. It can just be easy to forget about it when you're in a group of 1,000 people riding together. If you are, well, that's the next one. If you're passing somebody, announce it, let them know. I mean, if you're on the total other side of the road, maybe not quite as necessary, but especially as we get more spread out, it's never fun to have somebody whiz right by your shoulder and you're like, hey, bro, you could have told me you were coming. So if you happen to be a faster person, let folks know that you're passing them. And that can also be a really nice time to just, give a word of encouragement to somebody else. Pace lining. This can be extremely helpful, especially when battling headwinds. It can seem intimidating to think about, especially if you've never been in a pace line. But it's as simple as like you can do it with 2 people. It's just getting behind each other to block the wind. I do like to, chat with that person and say, hey, do you want to work together for a little bit? The person in front is going to have to work harder because they're blocking the wind, but the person behind gets to relax a little bit. And then just making sure you're switching. If you're in a bigger group, you can go even faster. And the big thing there is to ride predictably. Try not to crush your wheels. So keeping enough space behind the person in front of you. But this can be super, super helpful. And it's something that I don't see people at our pace level doing very often. A lot of us are working incredibly hard when we could just work a little bit smarter and work together to battle those wins. And again, it just takes communication and saying, hey, you want to work together for this next part. Yeah, great point, Bennett. Don't pace line too close. It's really easy to, clip somebody's wheel and go down. So just be mindful of it. And again, you should ask before you just hop on somebody's wheel. Typically most folks will say yes, especially if you say, hey, you pull for you pull for a little bit and then I'll pull for a little bit. So this one is a huge pet peeve of mine. Stay to the right of the road, allowing the faster folks to pass you on the left, especially when you're climbing a hill. We're going to be out in Kansas. You're going to be able to see the hills coming. And so using that time before the hill to kind of maneuver your way to the right side of the road, especially if you think, hey, I'm feeling a little tired right now. I might need to walk this hill. Get into a good position on the road. So that way, if you do need to get off and walk, it's no big deal. People can just go around you. I did Ragbri last year. And if folks have done Ragbri, it's right across Iowa. There were people getting off their bikes in the middle of the road, which is just frankly a really dangerous situation. So anything we can do to avoid that. And then finally, follow the rules of the road. They're not closed roads. Every driver I've ever encountered during Unbound has been incredible, encouraging, friendly, but there are potentially other cars on the road. And so just making sure that, when you're turning onto a road, you're looking for other cars, that sort of thing. Just be smart. I've seen some really dangerous things happen out there, and I would hate for anything horrific to happen. Okay, so we are coming to the end. I wanted to share additional resources with you before we get into Q&A. And again, I will be sending this out to everybody. Gravelcyclist.com has a really great, they have a ton of reviews, but they have a really great, they call it their newbie section. And I actually learned some things in there looking through it. Bicycling Magazine has a great gravel guide talking about all the things we just talked about, but in way more depth. I don't typically recommend Reddit, but the gravel cycling forum or subreddit is actually incredibly helpful and really, really good. And that can be a great place to bounce some questions off. If you're thinking about tire inserts, that can be a great place to ask some questions. If you're thinking about a saddle or a bike, and maybe it's something that our group doesn't have that much experience with, that can be a great place. And then, of course, the Unbound Gravel website, dig around in there. Somebody mentioned the training plan. There's all sorts of hidden goodies on there. So dig in there. It can be some fun reading. And then finally, the Facebook group. I hope for that to be a resource and also kind of a place of inspiration. Finally, I feel a little silly encouraging this, but last year a really cute film, it's like 10 minutes long, came out. It's called Journey to Unbound. It's on YouTube, and it was about my first 100 mile. And it was really fun to make. Somebody asked at the very beginning about the time cutoff, and that was a big part of my first 100 mile, was making sure I made it to the cutoff in time. And I think I made it with like 30 seconds to spare. So it's like a nice little feel-good film. So I encourage you all to watch it. You'll get to know me a little bit better. So let's go ahead and go into Q&A. I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your evening to join us. The next call will be on May 8th, and we'll get into a lot more specifics. I'm going to send out another survey of what topics do we want to cover, but we'll cover more in depth on navigation, on training, and then just more of what to expect from actual race day and race weekend, because by that point, the schedule will be out, the routes will be out, and we'll just know a lot more information. So if folks have questions and want to come off mute, you're more than welcome to, and we'll hang out for a little bit. I really appreciate you guys joining. Brian, great question. Good source for larger bodied bibs. So couple brands, and actually we have a resource on the All Bodies on Bikes website, but there's a brand called Aerotech. They make up to 6XL, and it's like a true 6XL. There's a brand called Fat Lad at the Back. They're out of the UK, and I've heard really great things about that as well. I think those are my best recommendations. What have you found to be the most challenging thing about Unbound? I think not getting caught up in the hype. There's so many pros there, and there's so much media, and there's so much excitement that it can be really hard to remember, I need to go my own 10-mile-an-hour pace if I'm going to make it to the end. It can also be frustrating, there's a lot of people there who are very, very experienced, have very nice bikes. And so it's hard not to play that comparison game of, am I good enough to be here? Am I just an imposter? But I'm hoping that, there's more and more of us coming out who are normal, everyday, regular people, and there is a place for us. So that's the hardest part for me. I absolutely love riding in the Flint Hills. It's beautiful. There's cows, there's farms, everybody's friendly. So I think that's the hardest part. Let's see. Yeah, I think Bennett answered that question great. Do you have cars trying to pass from behind? Occasionally, but you'll hear them coming from far enough in advance. I think last year I had I don't even know what the farm implement is called, but it looked like a giant alien device with mosquito arms. We passed each other on the road, but I just pulled over and let them go because I was like, this thing is absolutely massive. And again, like I said, drivers are typically very kind. They're aware that Unbound is happening. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to them. So, When it's dry, is the dust a problem? Yes, the dust can be a challenge. I like to ride with a bandana, so that way if a car does go by quickly and kicks up a cloud of dust, you can just, pull the bandana up over your face and you're good to go. But also hydrating is really important there. But you will notice, after the ride, you'll have brown boogers for a day or two. It's really fun, and you'll find dust in all your crevices and mud and all the stuff. But that's just part of the experience. Um, yeah, Christy already answered that. Favorite coffee shop in Emporia. There's only two. You'll get to know them well. I love Gravel City coffee, but Granada is great as well. Um, Tips for flying with your bike. Yes. If you've never done it before, it can be really daunting, but I would say, a couple weeks out, talk to your local bike shop and see if they have a box that you can use. And then you're going to want to pack it in there as best as you can. You'll take the wheels off, and you really just don't want your stuff to move while you're flying. So you'll take the wheels off, you take the pedals off. There's a million YouTube videos. If you have an air tag, throw an air tag on it. Although I'll be honest, I fly with my bike more than 20 times a year and I've never had any issues with it. So I'm just trying to get to all of these. Oh yeah, bike shops can also pack it up for you. And Bike Flats does a great job. Yeah, Christy brought up that Merchant Cycles has a program with them. And I believe this information is on the Unbound website, but essentially your bike would be shipped to Merchant Cycles and then they would probably build it back up for you, which is really nice. How hot can it get? I'm gonna pass that to Christy.
I lost you for a second. The heat is real. It can get super hot, and I would actually say of all of the conditions of weather that can happen, the heat is the one that for me is the most scary, because most people don't have the time to truly acclimate to it. So if you are concerned about a hot day, I think you need to take the precautions of making sure you're hydrating properly prior to, that you're making sure that you're getting plenty of electrolytes, and that you also have a plan to recognize that's a good chance of when maybe you're wearing a heart rate monitor, when you're recognizing when you're going past your limit. Ice socks are a huge plus for riding in the heat. And what that basically is you're just taking like a pantyhose, stuffing it with ice, and then you can put it around the back of your neck to help cool yourself off. I do say a lot of times people will take water and dump it on their head, but when you talk to nutritionists, they'll tell you you're better off putting that water in your body rather than putting it on your head. So I think you just need to be read up, especially if you're affected by the heat, on tips to practice riding in the heat and being out in the heat. There's not a lot of shade. That's one of the things about our courses, is that they're very exposed. So it's real, and it can be very scary. So that one, to me, I'd rather throw mud at you than heat. So personally, but yeah, those are some of my tips to that. And really, I think a lot of it is navigating or mitigating what can happen in the heat prior to getting here. Making sure you're staying fueled and hydrated will really help offset that. We also have a couple places here in town that will offer IVs for athletes. So if you're behind on that, you can do something like that, where you can get an extra boost intravenously for some hydration. But you should be able to navigate it if you're prepared going in.
Thanks. Those are great tips. I also love to just use a bandana
Yeah.
because you get that wet and it's like built-in air conditioning for a few minutes before it dries out, but it is helpful. Sunscreen, sun exposure is also a challenge for some folks. So long sleeves can be your friends, as counterintuitive as it seems. They make really great, like, lightweight long sleeve jerseys nowadays. Let's see. Carla asked if the 50-mile route will be similar to 2021. Who knows? We'll find out.
Yeah, it will be. Sorry, it will be the
Okay.
2022. Yeah, it will be. I mean, I see the question here on age groups. There's age groups, but we don't line you up that way.
It's just a mass start.
Mhm.
So if you are hoping to be competitive, you'll want to line up closer to the front of the pack. So yeah. What do you do for going to the bathroom on the course? That is a really good question. Ideally, you can wait till the aid station. There will be porta potties at the aid station. If it is an absolute emergency, finding a discreet place that hopefully is not somebody's yard. If I remember correctly, we go through some pretty remote areas, where, it's wooded or it's forested, and you can kind of duck off there to take care of nature as needed. So. Anything to add on that, Christy? I'm trying to think. I know,
That's
like,
you nailed it. You just need to be aware that that can happen and try to use porta potties. And
yeah,
if you can't, be discreet.
exactly. Yeah, be discreet. I know Steamboat Gravel is dealing with this right now. So we want to be good to our neighbors on the course. Denise, there's not a time limit for the 50. And we will send the recording out to everyone as well, where we talk about that. So. Yeah, I'm really excited for you all. Oh, the other thing, we didn't even talk about, but is chamois cream.
Mm.
I highly recommend using a chamois cream, especially as we get into Emporia. There can be humidity factors, especially if you're coming from some place that doesn't have humidity. So using some sort of anti-chafe cream can be really, really helpful. I know Chamois Butter is a sponsor of the event. I'm happy to share a discount code for Twisted Spoke, but use whatever works for you. Everybody's body is different. So, yeah, and I will get that Strava group set up and then look for an email from me with an invitation to the Zwift ride. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know you guys. And feel free to email me with additional questions or ask the Facebook group. So,
Thank you both very much.
thank you guys. Really appreciate
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Have a great night. I'm going to go ahead and stop
Thanks,
sharing.
Christy. Thanks, Marley.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.